Today we are going over 5 landscape photography myths many believe that just simply are not true. Hi, I'm Hugo, a photographer from Finland, and I have done photography for now over 8 years. I get lots of questions from other photographers, and most of these myths that I'm going through are some that come up very often. So let's dive in and bust these myths. But before that, if you haven't tried out Focus Notes, my newsletter, you can do so from the link down below. I share exclusive photography insights over there. Alright, myth number 1, and it is that you must always shoot wide angle. And that just couldn't be less true. Sometimes it is the right choice to use a wide angle when you have a great scene, maybe you have something amazing in the foreground, but sometimes you don't have a great foreground. Sometimes the entire landscape isn't amazing, but you do notice something in the landscape that does look amazing. For example, a mountain of some sorts. And then it just makes sense to pick a telephoto lens instead. You ignore everything else, you zoom in to the mountain, and you take the photo. Many think landscape photography is just about capturing the entire view, everything that is going on. But that just simply isn't true. Photography is about selecting certain parts what you want to showcase. And then you just crop out everything else. I would highly recommend having a telephoto lens as part of your kit if you don't already have that. But of course, if you don't like zooming in and you just like the wide angle look, then don't get the telephoto. But don't think you always must take a wide angle photo. That just simply is not true. Myth number 2 is that you have to travel to incredible places to make amazing work. This is something I see come up so often, and again, it just couldn't be further from the truth. Of course, when you go to an incredible place, you have incredible photo opportunities and you might see them much more than, say, in your hometown. But what I can say is that I find the town where I was born in, I find it quite boring, to be honest, apart from some things, and that being Northern Lights. When we see Northern Lights, that's really amazing. But apart from that, I find it not the most exciting place. And that has also led me to travel to other parts of Finland and the world. But still, somehow, my best photos have come from my hometown. So I have traveled insanely much over the past few years and most of my photography career so far, but still I get my best photos in my hometown. Why is this? I have a little hypothesis about this, and it is that you can't just go into a random location and immediately see everything that there are, and also in the best conditions. Well, I believe I have got my best photos in my hometown, even though I find it rather boring, is because I know it. I know the place. I can just focus on seeing when the best conditions hit. I can choose to go out, and I don't need to think about getting lost and how to go from A to B because I know that. I can just focus on capturing the best photos possible. That's what I'm now aiming to do when I travel for photography. I don't just go there for a week because I know I need to get to know the place a bit better, to immerse myself in there in order to get the best photos. Like right now, I'm in Georgia and I am here for three and a half weeks in total. And most of the time I am not shooting, but I am looking at the weather and planning out the best photos possible, or that I will catch the best opportunities, so to say. So really, you don't need to go to some other place, and you can totally make photos in your hometown. You just need to look for it. If you tell yourself constantly, here is nothing, then you are gonna find nothing. This comes down to something we have in the brain called RAS, reticular activation system. Very simply, it means that whatever you look for, you find. And what question you ask determines what you will see. And how you speak to yourself determines what your brain will look for. So if you tell yourself that there is nothing to see, nothing to photograph, then you see nothing to photograph. But if you do start to ask yourself different questions, then you will start to see also differently. So please don't rule out your hometown. You can absolutely make great work, no matter how boring your hometown might seem. I promise you there is something you can photograph, as long as you believe that to an extent. Alright, myth number 3 is that photos must be technically perfect to be good. So obviously you want to nail your camera settings, so the ISO, shutter speed and aperture, and you want your photo to be sharp, of course. But if you don't get this perfect, it does not mean your photo isn't great. In fact, my most famous photograph is not technically perfect. Yes, the ISO, I think I nailed that pretty well. I did nail the shutter speed and aperture. But the photo wasn't actually that sharp. So it was the second time I was using my Astro lens, and I happened to miss the focus, I think. So I was a bit bummed, like, okay, now I got this cool photo, but it's not extremely sharp. Then I did all kind of post-processing on it to make it seem like more sharp, but when you zoom in, you can tell it could be sharper. Yet it is my most famous photograph, and most people don't know it is not perfectly sharp because they don't look that closely into it. And this is what I want to get across to you. Of course, aim to have great settings, but the story and capturing the moment is always more important than settings. So if your photo is a bit blurry, not completely sharp, it can still be a great photograph. Story over settings. And if you'd like to learn the storytelling side of photography, so that your photos aren't just technically okay, but that they actually say something and evoke some emotions in people, then you'd love Storylines, my photography mentorship, and you can join the waitlist from the link down below for that. And I will let you know when the spots are open. Myth number 4 is that you need an expensive camera to take great landscape photos. And again, simply, it is not true. It is not true. Now, gear does matter to an extent. Say if you'd want to take those telephoto photos, as we talked earlier, then you would need a telephoto lens. But if you do cover enough of range, so you could take wide-angle photos, you could take telephoto photos, and basically the photos that you would like to take, you don't feel limited by the gear, then the gear doesn't matter. The gear doesn't matter. If you have 24 megapixels versus 40 megapixels versus 12 megapixels, it might not matter. Especially if you don't print your work, it's not gonna matter. I shoot with Sony a7 III. I've had this for 7 years over, and some buttons aren't working very well anymore. Yet I feel I'm taking the best photos of my career. And it's not the best camera in the world. But photography isn't about cameras, it's about skill. Like, that's the main thing. Camera is just your tool. So don't feel you need a very, very expensive camera to take great photos. I've seen it over and over again. There are people with great camera gear, incredibly expensive camera gear, but they just can't take photos that they wish. And that's because they actually haven't learned and invested into learning the skill itself. So when you do have the skill, you can use pretty much any camera to make great photos. So you don't need an expensive camera system necessarily. So myth number 5. This is something that I don't see often talked about. This is my own take, and I really believe in this. And it is that, the myth is that it is terrible if you lose any details in the darks or the highlights. And even though, yes, you want to get your exposure correct, sometimes losing detail does not matter. It does not matter. For example, if you take a night photo, if there's nothing interesting in the dark parts of the, say you're at the forest, you're photographing a night sky, and say in the forest there's nothing interesting, it doesn't matter if the trees don't have detail. It just doesn't matter. Sometimes the correct choice is to have sky overexposed. Not very often, but there are some cases where having a sky or something else makes sense to have overexposed. You must understand, sometimes losing the detail is not catastrophic, and sometimes it is the right choice. So, of course, aim to go and get the exposure very well, but don't feel like you can never lose detail. If you lose detail when it matters, for example, you have a great sky, it's sunset, and you overexpose it, then yeah, it's not good. But if the sky is anyway very boring and say it's not a major part of your photo, in some cases, very few cases, it can be better choice to leave it overexposed. So that was myth number 5. A bit more hot take, but that's what I do with my own photos. When I take night photos, I really don't care if I lose detail in the darks, because sometimes it just doesn't contribute to the story. So there you have it. I hope you found this insightful, and if you would want to indeed learn more from me and guide you personally on your photography journey, then join the waitlist for the storylines down below in the description. And if you loved this video, you will also love this video over here. Watch it to avoid the 7 mistakes I see nearly every photographer make. So watch that next. Right, this was awesome, and I see you in the next one.